All right, so are you ready to dive in? Today we're looking at plant technology, how it's like build civilizations and change the planet.
Yeah, it's a pretty massive topic, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean we've got some biology stuff and some agriculture materials to look through, and it's a lot more interesting than you'd think.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Like, get this. Did you know that before like farming and stuff, the earth could only support like 10 million people?
10 million.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a far cry from where we are
I
now.
know, right? Today it's like almost 8 billion. I mean, that just shows you how important plant tech is.
Yeah, that's kind of the most obvious impact. But
Yeah,
there's so much more to it than just population numbers. It's like a huge rabbit hole to go down.
I'm ready to fall down that rabbit hole.
Ah,
I'm totally ready.
okay, let's do it.
So I'm picturing like those early humans, right? They're figuring out how to grow food and everything just changes.
Yeah.
And what's crazy is how efficient they were back then. Like, our sources say they were getting something like 20 joules of food energy for every joule of effort they put in.
It really puts our modern systems to shame, doesn't it?
I know, it's crazy, right?
Like that 20-to-1 ratio, that meant they had all this extra energy. Like, think about it. They could then use that energy for other things. That's where you get like all the art and the social structures.
Oh, so that's what led to like the early science and stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
So wait, are you saying we're less efficient now? But I mean, we have all this technology, right? Like tractors and fertilizers and all this advanced stuff.
Yeah, no, it seems kind of counterintuitive, but our sources, they point out that modern agriculture, it only gets about zero point 0.1 joules of food energy for every joule we put in. It's like
Yeah.
we've traded efficiency for scale.
Okay, so help me wrap my head around this. Where's all that energy going in modern agriculture?
Think about the whole chain from like planting a seed all the way to getting it on your plate. You've got the massive machines and most of them run on fossil fuels.
Okay, yeah.
And then you've got the processing plants and the transportation networks to get the food to the stores.
Oh, yeah, right.
And then, oh, and don't forget about keeping the food cold. Like all the refrigeration along the way.
Right, right.
It all adds up. And it's not like we're using renewable energy to power all of this. We're basically using up that ancient sunlight that's trapped in fossil fuels.
Whoa. I never thought about it like that.
It's kind of wild, isn't it? It's like our whole food system is running on borrowed time, or I guess borrowed sunlight.
Yeah, borrowed sunlight, yeah.
Which is a finite resource, right? So it raises some pretty big questions about the future of how we produce our food.
Okay, so we've got this energy efficiency thing.
Mm.
But what about water? Our sources, they mentioned irrigation, and I know that can be kind of a touchy subject.
Well, for sure. I mean, even in a country like Canada, where we've got a ton of water, it still matters how we use it.
Yeah.
Like if we over irrigate, it can deplete our aquifers, which are like those underground water reserves. And a lot of regions really depend on them.
Right.
Plus, when you irrigate, you get runoff. And that runoff, it can carry fertilizers and pesticides, which then end up polluting, rivers and lakes.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It can be a real mess. There's this really cool visual in one of the sources. It's a mini lab that uses colored crystals. And it shows how irrigation, how it can concentrate minerals in the soil.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's like over time, you're basically turning, good fertile land into something like closer to a salt flat.
Wow.
Yeah, it's kind of scary when you think about it. Like even something as simple as watering crops, if we're not careful, it can have all these unintended consequences.
Yeah, that's a good point. So then there's all the other stuff that we use in modern agriculture, like
Right.
fertilizers, pesticides, and all those high-yield seeds.
Yeah.
Our sources, specifically Table 16.5, it lists all the costs and benefits of each one. And it's
Yeah.
not like a simple, oh, this is good or this is bad situation.
No, definitely not. It's all about trade-offs. Like, take fertilizers, right? They help us grow more food, but then you've got this problem where the excess nutrients run off into the water.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And that causes ecological problems. Like, it can throw things really out of balance in our ecosystems.
And then with pesticides, while they help control pests, there's that whole bioaccumulation thing.
Exactly.
So, like the pesticides build up in the food chain and the animals at the top, they end up with like way higher concentrations of those chemicals.
It's not exactly appetizing, is it?
Not really.
And then you have to think about what it does to biodiversity, too.
Right.
I mean, a lot of these high-yield crops, they're monocultures,
Oh, right. Yes.
So you have these huge fields, and they're all just one type of plant.
Right, right.
So it reduces the variety of habitats, right, and the food
Yeah.
sources for all these other species,
Yeah, makes sense.
which then, leads to a decline in pollinators and other organisms that are really important for the whole ecosystem.
It's kind of like we've gotten really good at producing food, but we've created all these other problems that we didn't really think about.
Exactly. It's like this unintended consequence. And the agricultural revolution, it wasn't just about, the new technologies. It started this whole chain reaction that completely reshaped human society and like our whole relationship with the planet.
Wow. So we've got this energy inefficiency, water problems, pollution, biodiversity loss.
Hmm.
What other things did this agricultural revolution kind of mess up?
Well, for one thing, humans, we kind of became tied to one spot. Like no more nomadic life, you had
Yeah,
to stay put and tend your crops.
right.
But that also made you really vulnerable to anything that happened in that area.
Oh, right, like a drought or a flood or something.
Exactly.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And I bet that also changed how people thought about time too, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Suddenly, you can't just wander around and find food whenever you want.
Right.
You've got these planting and harvesting seasons that you have to plan around.
Oh, okay.
So time becomes this really valuable resource,
Right.
and it's directly tied to whether you survive or not.
Wow.
Yeah, and our sources actually suggest that this new awareness of time, this need for planning and scheduling, it was a huge shift in how humans thought, like a big step in consciousness even.
Wow, that's really interesting. And it probably affected how people live together, right? Like family structures and social stuff.
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I mean, as families settled down and started farming, the family became way more important.
Right.
You needed more people to work the land, and passing down the farm became a big deal. So, you get this focus on family interests. And a lot of times that meant that the needs of the larger community, they were kind of put on the back burner. So it's really amazing how this one thing, just learning to grow plants could have such a huge impact on like everything, from how we think about time to how we organize our societies.
It really shows you how powerful technology can be. Even something like plant cultivation,
Yeah.
it can be a driving force behind social and cultural evolution.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So we've talked about how the agricultural revolution changed human society,
Right.
but let's not forget about the biosphere,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
It's not just about like pretty fields of corn.
Definitely not.
There's a lot going on beneath the surface.
Absolutely. And it's not all pretty. I mean, as humans cleared land for agriculture, we cut down forests.
Right.
We drained wetlands. We destroyed natural habitats.
Yeah.
And that, all of that leads to less biodiversity because countless species lose their homes and their food sources.
So we're talking about deforestation, habitat loss, less biodiversity. It's kind of a bleak picture.
Yeah, it can feel that way, especially when you think about what industrial agriculture is still doing. Like we've got all these monocultures, these huge fields of just one crop, and they're taking over the landscape, replacing all these diverse ecosystems.
And then there's the whole problem of the soil and the water getting contaminated, like all those fertilizers and pesticides we talked about.
Yeah.
They don't just disappear.
No, they seep into the groundwater, they pollute the rivers and lakes, it messes up the whole balance.
Wow. It's like we've traded all this amazing life for these simplified, fragile farmlands.
And the consequences, they're felt way beyond the farm. It affects everything.
It's a lot to think about. How did we get here?
Yeah.
And what are we going to do about it?
That's the million-dollar question. And luckily our sources, they're not all doom and gloom. There's stuff we can do.
Okay, good. I was hoping you were going to say that. So what can we do to make things more sustainable?
Well, let's talk about that in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay, sounds good. I'm ready for some good news.
All right, stay tuned. Before we get to the solutions, there's one more thing we need to talk about.
Oh, okay.
It's about science and critical thinking.
Oh, yeah. The sources talked about that a lot, right?
Mhm.
Like, it's not enough to just know about the problems. We have to, like, understand where the information came from and how to think about it, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Science is a really powerful tool, but it's not, perfect. It's always changing.
Right.
And it's important to, know what it can and can't do.
So you're saying we shouldn't just, like, believe everything scientists say?
Not blindly, no. It's more about being like a critical thinker, ask questions, look at things from different angles, and be careful about anything that seems like it's too good to be true.
Okay, that makes sense. Especially these days, right? Where Like everyone's got an opinion on everything, and it's so easy to spread like misinformation online. How do we even know what to trust anymore?
Well, you got to look for credibility, right? Like, where's the information coming from? Is it, a scientific journal, a government agency, or like a real expert in the field?
Okay, yeah, yeah.
And then, double check things. See if other sources are saying the same stuff. And be extra careful about information that just seems to, perfectly match what you already believe.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah.
So even if it sounds like what I want to hear, I should still like double check it.
Yeah, absolutely. And remember, even scientists can have biases, right? And sometimes research can be influenced by, who's paying for it or other agendas.
Yeah,
It's just about being aware of all that stuff and thinking critically.
okay, I get it. But it still feels kind of overwhelming. I mean, I'm not a scientist, right?
Right.
So how can I really understand all this stuff well enough to actually make a difference?
You don't need a PhD to be like a good citizen. Just be curious.
Okay.
Read books, read articles, listen to podcasts like this one. Talk to people who think differently than you do.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. So it's about like staying curious and open-minded.
Exactly.
But what about actually doing something? What can we do as individuals to move things in a more sustainable direction?
Oh, there's tons of stuff we can do. For one thing, we can cut down on food waste. That's a big one. Did you know that like a third of all the food produced globally ends up in the trash?
A third. Seriously.
Yeah, it's crazy.
I mean, I know I've definitely thrown away like wilted lettuce or leftovers that went bad.
We've all done it. But if we're more careful about what we buy and how we store our food and, maybe get creative with leftovers, we can make a big difference.
Okay, less food waste.
Yeah.
Got it. What about like our diets? Anything we can do there?
Our sources suggest that shifting toward plant-based diets could be really helpful. Like meat production, especially on a large scale, it takes a lot of resources. Way more land, water, and energy to produce a pound of beef compared to like a pound of beans or lentils.
So eating less meat or even going vegetarian or vegan could make a big difference in terms of our environmental impact.
Exactly. And it doesn't have to be all or nothing, Even just cutting back on meat a couple of times a week can help.
Okay, that's good to know. I was also thinking about supporting local farmers and like sustainable agriculture, like buying stuff from farmers markets and choosing organic options when I can. Does that actually make a difference?
It totally does. By supporting local and sustainable food systems, you're not only getting fresher, healthier food, you're also supporting farmers who are trying to do things the right way.
And I do like the idea of knowing where my food is coming from. It feels more connected.
Right. And there are so many ways to get involved. You could join a community garden, volunteer on a farm, or even just, start a conversation with your friends about making more sustainable food choices. It all adds up.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, what about technology? Can technology help create a more sustainable food system?
Absolutely. There's precision agriculture, for example, that uses sensors and data to figure out how to use water and fertilizer more efficiently.
Wow.
So less waste, less impact on the environment.
Okay.
And then there's vertical farming.
Vertical farming.
Yeah, it's where you grow crops in, like these stacked layers. It uses less land and water than traditional farming.
Wow, that's interesting. So it sounds like there's some really cool innovations happening. But it's important to remember that technology isn't like a magic solution, right?
No, absolutely. We have to use it responsibly and ethically. It's about finding the right balance between new technology and, respecting the environment.
Okay, I get it. It's a lot to think about. But this deep dive has been really eye-opening. We started by looking at the history of plant technology, but it's really about understanding our place in the world and taking responsibility for our actions.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. It's like recognizing that we're all connected, from the food we eat to the air we breathe.
Yeah.
And our actions, they have an impact on everything.
And those actions can either make things worse or make things better.
Exactly. So to everyone listening out there, you have the power to make a difference. Stay curious, stay informed, and keep taking action.
Yeah, because the future of food and the future of the planet depend on it.
Well said. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you feel inspired to create a more sustainable and delicious future.
So we've talked about a lot of stuff,
Sure.
the energy, the water, how society changed, what it's doing to like all the plants and animals. It can feel kind of overwhelming.
It really can. But, we don't want you to just feel stuck with the problems. We want to give you the knowledge to actually do something.
Right, exactly. We talked about some solutions last time, but let's really dig in. What can we do to make agriculture more sustainable in the future?
Well, one thing that our sources keep bringing up is this idea of a closed loop, like cutting down on waste at every step of the way.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. We talked about cutting down on food waste at home, but what about, the bigger picture?
There's some pretty amazing stuff happening. Like some companies are taking food waste and turning it into biogas.
Biogas.
Yeah, it's a renewable energy source.
Hmm.
So, you can use it to power homes and businesses.
Wow, that's great.
And then other companies are taking food scraps and composting them, which makes the soil better.
Right.
So you need less fertilizer.
So instead of just trashing food, we can actually use it for something good.
Exactly. We just have to change how we think about it, see it as a resource.
Yeah.
And this circular economy idea, it can work for other parts of agriculture too.
Okay.
Like instead of always using synthetic fertilizers, you can use cover crops and stuff to make the soil healthier naturally.
Those are some great ideas for big changes, but what about just regular people? Besides eating less meat and wasting less food, is there anything else we can do?
Supporting local farmers and sustainable agriculture is a huge one.
Okay.
If you buy produce that's grown locally, it doesn't have to travel as far.
Right.
So less environmental impact. Plus, you're helping out your community and farmers who are doing things the right way.
It does feel good to know where your food comes from, It's like more personal.
Totally. And there's so many ways to get involved. Community gardens, volunteering on a farm, even just talking to your friends and family about sustainable food.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Okay, what about technology? Can that help make things more sustainable?
Absolutely. There's this thing called precision agriculture. It uses sensors and data to use water and fertilizer more efficiently.
Oh, wow.
So less waste, less impact. And then there's vertical farming, which is pretty cool. You basically grow crops in these stacked layers, so you need less land and water.
That's amazing. So technology can be part of the solution.
Yeah.
But we can't just rely on technology to fix everything, right?
Oh, definitely not. We have to be smart about how we use it. It's all about finding the right balance.
Well, this deep dive has been pretty eye-opening. We started by looking at the history of plant technology, but it's really about figuring out where we fit in and taking responsibility for what we do.
That's a great way to put it. We're all part of this big interconnected system.
And every choice we make, every little thing, has an impact.
Exactly. And those choices can either make things worse or make things better.
So to everyone listening, remember, you can make a difference.
Mhm.
Keep learning, keep thinking, and keep doing something about it. The future of food, the future of our planet, it depends on all of us.
Well said. And thanks for coming along on this deep dive with us. We hope you feel inspired to create a better future for food and for everyone.